My landlord tried to evict me, illegally. So I took him to court and won his car. I was brushing my teeth after a 12-hour night shift when I noticed the envelope taped to my door. At first, I thought it was junk mail, maybe a flyer, or another useless coupon. But the moment I saw the bold letters that read, "Notice of Termination of Tenancy," I froze. My toothbrush hung in midair, dripping foam onto the floor. I hadn't missed rent. I was never late. I didn't make noise, didn't throw parties. I barely even lived like a person. Mostly just slept and worked, ate whatever I could microwave in under 3 minutes. So why was I being evicted? I ripped open the notice. Due to excessive damage to property and failure to comply with lease agreements, I stopped reading. It was total crap. I lived in a tiny, slightly run-down one-bedroom apartment in a 3-unit house owned by Mr. Gallagher, a smug landlord with a gold chain thicker than my thumb and a mustache that tried way too hard. He always gave me weird vibes, but I ignored it because the rent was cheap and the location was 10 minutes from the hospital. I called him immediately. No answer, left a voicemail, then another. By noon, I still hadn't heard back. At 3 p.m., my power went out. Not just a flicker. Gone. Lights, fridge, air conditioning, all dead. I checked the breaker. Nothing tripped. I knocked on the upstairs tenant's door. No problem on her end, just mine. That's when I realized he'd cut the power. I called the city's housing department. They said what he was doing was illegal and suggested I document everything. So I started recording. My phone became my witness. I filmed the dead outlets, the spoiled food in the fridge, the sweat on my face at 89 degrees indoors. I kept a log of every day without power. I found a lawyer's number on a tenant rights form and left a message. That night, I slept at a coworker's place. When I returned the next morning, the lock had been changed. I stood in the hallway with my heart pounding. I wasn't even sure I was angry yet. More stunned. My cat, Pebble, was still inside. I called Gallagher again. This time he picked up. "You shouldn't have made this so hard, Claire," he said casually, like we were discussing the weather. "I have new tenants lined up. Triple what you're paying. It's just business." I asked him about the cat. He paused, then laughed. "She'll be fine. Maybe I'll keep her." I lost it. I screamed, threatened to call the police, animal control, whoever. He told me to go ahead, then hung up. That's when the rage kicked in. The shaking kind that makes your vision blur. I called animal control first, then a locksmith, then my lawyer. Well, not mine yet, but a woman named Natalie who called me back that afternoon. When I told her everything, she listened silently, then said, "I've seen worse, but this is winnable." She walked me through what I needed. Photos, videos, copies of my lease, the eviction notice, timestamps, prior payments. I had it all. I finally got back into my apartment that evening, thanks to the locksmith and 2 very persuasive officers from animal control. Pebble was hiding under the bed, terrified, but alive. The food and water bowls were empty. That night, I sat on the floor with her in my lap, charging my phone off a backup battery and trying not to cry. The next day, Gallagher posted a handwritten sign in the hallway. "Do not trust Claire. She destroys property. Liar." I took a photo, added it to the folder labeled lawsuit. I learned from a neighbor that he'd done something similar before. Forced out an elderly couple last year. Same tactic. Cut power, changed locks, claimed damage. No one fought back. But I wasn't them. I was exhausted, yes. Overworked, underpaid, and half alive most days. But I wasn't going to let him win. The lawyer filed the first round of paperwork the following Monday. The court date was set 3 weeks out. Natalie explained that in the meantime, Gallagher might try to escalate. Intimidation, fake repairs, more lies. She wasn't wrong. 2 days later, I came home to find my bathroom window shattered. Nothing taken, just glass everywhere and the back gate open. Police came, took a report. I filed another complaint with the city. I couldn't prove it was him, but I could prove the pattern. He'd made one mistake, underestimating me. I worked trauma. I held people's lives together with my hands. I'd stitched up the bleeding, calmed the dying, comforted families through the worst nights of their lives. Did he really think I'd fold over some fake eviction and a broken lock? I wasn't just going to stay. I was going to make sure he regretted ever targeting me. And maybe, just maybe, I'd take something from him too. Not just peace of mind. Something permanent. The first pre-trial hearing came faster than I expected. Gallagher didn't even show. His lawyer, some graying man with a worn-out briefcase and a smirk that said, "I've done this before," tried to delay things. Natalie wasn't having it. "Your client has already violated multiple housing codes. My client has video evidence, physical documentation, and testimony lined up. We move forward," she said calmly, but with enough edge to shut him down. The judge agreed. Back outside the courthouse, Natalie lit a cigarette and looked at me. "He's not taking this seriously yet. That's good for us. I nodded, gripping the folder in my hands until my knuckles turned white. It held every receipt, every picture, every email. Evidence, yes, but it felt more like armor. The next week was a game of endurance. Gallagher posted new notes on the door. One read, "Claire is under investigation. Beware." Another said I was legally trespassing, which didn't even make sense. I took pictures of each one. Then came the water shutoff. I turned the tap in the morning and got a sad hiss of air. My upstairs neighbor, Angela, knocked minutes later holding her toothbrush and fuming. Mine's off too. I texted Gallagher. No response. Called the city water department. They said the bill hadn't been paid. On purpose. So now I had no power and no water. I went to stay at a friend's place again, but I came back every day to record the conditions. I knew Natalie needed everything. And I wanted Gallagher to know I wasn't backing down. Then one afternoon, while I was filming the broken window again for a follow-up report, a car pulled into the driveway. A cherry red 1967 Mustang. Gleaming. Obnoxiously loud. Gallagher stepped out in mirrored sunglasses, wearing a leather jacket like he thought he was in a movie. He saw me filming and smiled. "You like the car? Bought her last month. She's a beauty, right?" I didn't say a word, just kept recording. Later that night, I mentioned the Mustang to Natalie. "He bragged about it," I told her. "Said he bought it last month." She whistled through her teeth. "You know what that tells me? He has assets. If we win this thing, we can go after them." I blinked. "Like, the car? If the court orders compensation and he can't or won't pay in cash," she said, "then yes. Especially if it's registered in his name and not protected under any LLC or shell." The idea of taking that obnoxious car from him didn't just feel satisfying. It felt righteous. I didn't have much spare time between shifts, but I started digging. Public records, property reports. I found out that Gallagher had been cited multiple times by the housing department. Everything from improper heating to unsafe stairways. He'd paid fines, sure, but kept doing the same things. Different tenants, same traps. I also discovered something else. He hadn't filed the proper paperwork for renovations he'd done on the top floor. That meant some of his rentals might technically be illegal. Natalie nearly clapped when I told her. "We can add that to the motion. It helps paint a picture," she said. "Systematic abuse, patterned behavior, not just a one-off." Meanwhile, Gallagher kept pushing. One evening, I returned to find trash dumped all over my porch. Old chicken bones, rotting vegetables, a half-used diaper. I knew he wanted me gone. I knew he wanted to break me. But he never saw the day I walked into the hospital with 3 patients coding at once. Never saw me cry in the supply closet because I'd lost someone. Never saw the strength I carried beneath the surface. His petty games didn't scare me. They fueled me. One morning, I got a knock at the door. A man introduced himself as a housing inspector. Apparently, Gallagher had filed a complaint that I had caused structural damage. The inspector was clearly annoyed by the waste of time, but he walked through the apartment anyway. At the end, he said, "This place is a mess, but not because of you. Because your landlord hasn't done basic maintenance in years." He wrote up a full report. I got a copy. Natalie added it to the stack. By the time our full court date arrived, we had a mountain of evidence. Photos, witnesses, former tenants, city inspectors, and, just to sweeten it, 2 neighbors who'd overheard Gallagher boasting about getting rid of Claire, the cheap tenant. He thought I was disposable. I was about to become unforgettable. The courthouse buzzed with a quiet tension that morning. I sat beside Natalie in a stiff wooden bench, clutching a thermos of cold coffee and trying not to shake. I'd barely slept. My stomach twisted every time the courtroom door creaked open. Gallagher walked in 15 minutes late. He wore a cheap suit that looked 2 sizes too big and sunglasses on his head like some kind of celebrity. He barely looked at me, but I caught the smirk as he nodded toward his lawyer. The judge was a middle-aged woman with a sharp voice and no patience for games. "Let's begin," she said, rapping the gavel, and just like that, it was real. Natalie opened strong. She outlined everything: the illegal eviction notice, the utilities shut off, the lock changes, the threats. Then she handed over a thick binder of evidence, placing it firmly in front of the judge. Gallagher's lawyer barely responded, just muttered something about ungrateful tenants and routine lease disputes. Then they tried to paint me as unstable, said I was combative, aggressive, that I damaged the property out of spite when I knew I was being evicted. The judge raised an eyebrow. "And where is the evidence of these damages?" Gallagher's lawyer flipped open a folder and showed 3 blurry photos of a cracked tile, a chipped doorknob, and a photo of what looked like scuffed paint. "This," he said smugly. I almost laughed. Natalie didn't. "Your Honor, we can verify with time-stamped photos that all of those issues existed before my client moved in. In fact, some of them are in the pre-lease inspection form signed by Mr. Gallagher himself." The judge nodded. Stricken from consideration, Gallagher slouched back in his chair. I took the stand next. I was nervous at first. My voice trembled. My palms sweated. But as I started recounting everything, the moment I found the eviction notice, the power shut off, Pebble trapped inside, the filth on my porch, something shifted in me. I stopped talking like a victim. I started talking like a witness. I described Gallagher's comments, his threats, his attitude. I presented my videos, showed the broken window, the handwritten signs, the inspector's report, the trash piles. I quoted him from memory. I have new tenants lined up, triple what you're paying, and maybe I'll keep the cat. I watched the judge take notes. Then Natalie called Angela, my upstairs neighbor. She was nervous too, but she told the truth. The water shut off, the notes Gallagher posted, the constant noise and threats. She even recalled hearing Gallagher brag to someone on speakerphone saying, she'll leave one way or another. Then came the surprise. Natalie brought in a man named James, a former tenant who'd moved out 6 months before I moved in. He looked worn down, like someone who'd lived too long under stress. He told the court how Gallagher had pulled the same stunt with him, fake damage claims, cutting off utilities, and bullying him out. I didn't have the energy to fight, he said quietly, but I wish I had. By the time we recessed for lunch, Gallagher was sweating through his shirt. In the hallway, he hissed at me as I passed. You're ruining my business. I stared him down. You ruined that all by yourself. When court resumed, Gallagher took the stand. It was a disaster. He talked over the judge, blamed me for attracting rats and lowering property value. He ranted about entitled millennials and how no good deed goes unpunished. Natalie just let him dig his own grave. Then she pounced. Mr. Gallagher, is it true you purchased a 1967 Mustang last month? He blinked. What does that have to do with anything? Just answer. Yes. And you registered it under your name? Yeah, why? So, if the court finds you liable for damages and cannot satisfy the judgment with liquid assets, the car would be eligible for seizure under California Civil Code 695.010, correct? He turned red. You're trying to steal my car? No, Natalie said, smiling. We're trying to recover damages. The law does that, not me. Gallagher tried to walk it back, but the seed had been planted. The judge took notes again. We wrapped for the day with the judge saying she would review all evidence and render a decision the following week. Outside, Gallagher shoved past me in the hallway. I hope you're proud. You just cost me everything. No, I said, you did that. The week leading up to the verdict was unbearable. Every time my phone buzzed, I thought it might be the courthouse calling early. I kept replaying the trial in my head. Gallagher's outbursts, the judge's raised eyebrows, James's quiet testimony. Part of me worried that something would go wrong. That somehow, Gallagher would wriggle out of it, just like he had with every tenant before me. Natalie reassured me every day. We did everything right. He buried himself up there. Still, I didn't let myself hope. Not until I was sitting in that courtroom again, knees pressed together, heart pounding, watching the judge shuffle through her paperwork. This court has reviewed all materials, heard extensive witness testimony, and examined the legal standing of both parties, she began, her voice calm, firm. It is the finding of this court that Mr. Gallagher engaged in unlawful eviction tactics, harassment of a tenant, and violated multiple local housing codes. Gallagher blinked. For once, he didn't speak. The judge went on. The evidence presented, video footage, city inspector reports, and testimony clearly demonstrate a pattern of retaliatory behavior meant to force the plaintiff, Ms. Claire Dawson, from her legally leased residence without due process. My ears were ringing. The defendant will pay damages totaling $18,000, including emotional distress, reimbursement for lost work hours, property damage, and court costs. I turned to Natalie in disbelief. 18? I whispered. She nodded slowly. That's just the start. The judge continued, almost like she'd heard me. In addition, due to Mr. Gallagher's failure to maintain sufficient liquid assets, and after reviewing his financial disclosures and assets on file, the court is approving the plaintiff's motion for asset recovery. Specifically, the court is awarding the 1967 Ford Mustang, VIN number ending in 8425, currently registered in Mr. Gallagher's name, to the plaintiff as partial satisfaction of damages. Gallagher exploded. You can't take my car. That's theft. That's my personal property. Sit down, Mr. Gallagher, the judge said coolly. You may appeal the ruling, but the vehicle transfer will proceed unless blocked by a higher court within 30 days. I sat frozen, mouth half open, as the judge slammed the gavel. The courtroom emptied quickly after that, but Gallagher stayed behind, still sputtering in disbelief. I stepped outside and burst into tears. Not the sad kind, the kind that erupts when your body finally believes it's safe. I could breathe. I could go home. I could turn the lights on and not wonder if the water would run that day. I could sleep in my own bed and know the door would lock behind me. Natalie squeezed my shoulder. "You won," she said softly. 2 days later, I stood in Gallagher's driveway with a court officer and a tow truck. The Mustang sat gleaming in the sun, just as cocky as its former owner. Gallagher came out in silence, arms crossed, jaw clenched. He handed over the keys like they were pieces of his soul. "You don't deserve her," he muttered. "Maybe," I said, pocketing the keys, "but I earned her." The tow truck hauled the car off to my friend's garage for safekeeping until the title transfer went through. I didn't even drive it at first. I just looked at it. It was more than a car. It was proof. Proof that someone like me, overworked, underestimated, exhausted, could stand up to someone like him and win. That night, I posted a short message in the local tenants forum where I first found Natalie's number. If your landlord threatens you, gaslights you, or cuts your power, don't let it slide. Document everything, know your rights, and never be afraid to fight. I just won $18,000 and his classic car. You can win too. Within an hour, my inbox was flooded. Messages from other tenants in my building, from people in nearby cities, from strangers dealing with similar bullies. I realized Gallagher wasn't a one-off. He was a symptom of a much bigger disease. But for once, someone had made him pay. I didn't expect the news story. A week after the verdict, I got a call from a local reporter named Jenna. She said she'd seen my forum post and had started digging into Gallagher's record. Apparently, he'd been quietly settling tenant disputes out of court for years, just enough to keep his name off the radar. But my case had gone public. "It's rare that a tenant not only wins," she said, "but wins like that." I agreed to speak with her, anonymously at first. We met in a quiet coffee shop and I told her everything. On the record, she asked to see the Mustang. I drove it to the lot where we took photos from a distance, me standing with my back to the camera. When the story aired that Friday evening, I watched from my couch with Pebble curled beside me. My phone vibrated nonstop the whole time. The headline read, "Tenant wins illegal eviction case. Leaves with $18,000 and landlord's classic Mustang." The comment section exploded. People shared their own horror stories. Others praised the judge. Someone even made a meme of Gallagher yelling in the courtroom, edited with Comic Sans captions. One guy offered to buy the Mustang. I didn't respond. By Monday, I was a kind of quiet legend in the tenant rights community. Natalie told me she'd already received 6 new calls from potential clients. "Claire, you've done more for renters this month than any billboard ever could." But it wasn't about fame. It wasn't even about revenge anymore. It was about peace. I'd lived months walking on eggshells, terrified every time I came home, wondering if something else would be broken, if my cat would be gone, if I'd be locked out again. That fear was gone now. I could exhale. I could sleep. I could plan. I gave my 30-day notice, not because I had to, but because I wanted a fresh start. Angela cried when I told her. "It won't be the same without you here," she said. "You'll have the whole building to yourself at this rate," I joked. But I meant it. Gallagher was bleeding tenants. After the story went viral, others in the neighborhood began to speak up. Someone filed a formal complaint with the city, another petition to revoke his landlord license. Even the tenants from the upstairs unit filed claims for unsafe living conditions. He started selling off property, fast. I wasn't sure if it was panic or strategy, but one listing after another started appearing online. Cheap too, like he was trying to cash out before the consequences caught up to him. I moved into a small apartment across town, one managed by a family-run company that actually responded to maintenance requests and sent me a welcome basket with snacks. I didn't even know landlords did that. On my first night there, I stood in the quiet, cool kitchen, flipped the light switch, and cried when everything worked like it was supposed to. The Mustang stayed in my friend's garage for a while. I didn't want to drive it every day, but I didn't want to sell it either. It had become something symbolic. Every time I looked at it, I remembered how close I'd come to giving up, how I'd almost let someone stomp all over me just because I was tired. But I hadn't, and I'd earned every inch of that glossy red paint. One afternoon, I took it out for a short drive down the coast. Just me, the wind, and the purr of the engine that used to belong to a man who thought he was untouchable. I laughed out loud as I shifted gears. It felt so good. So absolutely ridiculous and beautiful, I nearly cried again. I didn't just survive him. I took something back. A few weeks after I settled into my new place, I got a letter in the mail. Thick legal stock. Official header. For a second, my stomach flipped, thinking Gallagher had appealed. But it wasn't from him. It was from the city. It informed me that due to the documentation I'd provided and the results of my court case, they had launched a formal investigation into Gallagher's real estate holdings. Several of his properties had already been flagged for code violations, and he was under review for license suspension. Attached was a thank you letter from the housing authority. My jaw dropped. He wasn't just facing fines anymore. He was at risk of losing the thing he cared about most: control. A few days later, Natalie called. "Looks like Gallagher is trying to settle with 3 of the other tenants you inspired." Quietly, of course. I couldn't help but grin. He's finally learning that silence doesn't buy safety anymore. "You did good, Claire," she said. "Really good." I hung up and stared at the ceiling for a long time. All this started with an envelope taped to my door. It ended with a system shaken, a predator exposed, and me, someone who had felt so small, standing taller than I ever thought possible. I didn't tell many people at work, not at first. I didn't want to be that person with the viral story, but word spread, as it always does. One night, on break, one of the newer nurses came up to me with tears in her eyes. "I read your story," she said. "I'm going through something similar. I thought I was going crazy. But now I think maybe I'm not." That moment hit me harder than any courtroom victory. If this whole nightmare could help someone else realize they weren't powerless, then maybe it was all worth it. The stress, the fear, the nights I slept on a friend's couch, every hour I spent documenting filth and calling inspectors and staring at Gallagher's smug face, maybe all of it mattered more than just me. Still, some days I think about the little things, like the way I flinch now when I hear heavy footsteps in a hallway, or how I double-check every lock before bed, even though I'm in a new building in a safe place with honest people. The scars don't just vanish, but they fade. Slowly they fade. One weekend, I took the Mustang out again. This time I invited Angela and her teenage son. He'd always admired the car from afar. I let him ride shotgun while she sat in the back, holding Pebble in a little carrier. We cruised down the coast, windows down, music up, all of us laughing like there was nothing behind us but dust. When I dropped them back home, Angela hugged me tight. "He was scared, you know," she whispered. "Gallagher, after your case, he stopped stomping around the halls, started locking his own doors." "I hope he stays scared," I said. But I didn't mean scared of me. I meant scared of truth, of accountability, of the fact that he wasn't invincible. A few nights later, I sat in the garage staring at the Mustang. I ran my hand across the hood, slow and thoughtful. It still felt surreal. It wasn't just a car. It was a trophy, not for revenge, for survival. A reminder that even when everything feels rigged against you, even when the power goes out and the locks are changed and the world seems stacked in someone else's favor, there is still a path forward, still a way to fight back. You just have to take that first step. I ended up getting the car's title in the mail 3 days later. My name, printed cleanly, where his used to be. I slipped it into a folder, tucked it into my drawer, and whispered aloud in the quiet, all I wanted was peace. What I got was justice, and one hell of a car.